Welcome to Inside Out, the Emotional Awareness Podcast, a Mentalus Academy production. Let's learn more about ourselves, inside and out.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us again today on our podcast. Just a quick editor's note to say that we did have some technical issues with the sound on this podcast, so we apologize if the quality isn't as good as some of our previous podcasts. We do thank you for being with us and for listening, and thank you so much. Enjoy this episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Inside Out podcast with Nedzin and myself again. And today, as our guest, we have Quinn, who is joining us. And Quinn, I will allow you to tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us about the topic you've chosen, and maybe tell us why you chose it.
So I believe the thumbnail of my topic is helping others without losing yourself.
Correct.
Along those lines, yeah. So I am a massage therapist. That is my day job. And then my hobby and other business is that I'm a farmer and an arborist. The flavor and all those things is that I'm legally blind. So that shapes a lot of my experiences too, or gives me some perspective that's maybe a bit unique. So here I am.
I haven't had you, Nedzin, give a little bit of a briefing, but maybe you could talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish here today.
Actually, what we're trying here is to have regular people to ask us questions about topics that may concern them. So whatever is important for themselves and they want to know or to have more answers for it without going into depth or into details.
Okay, so maybe Quinn will start with some questions that might be on your mind about this topic.
It's fine. It's something I often wrestle with. I think I'm a fairly empathic person. I think I'm a results-driven person. So at the end of the day, regardless of how you feel about things, there's certain things you just have to do. There's a lot of non-negotiables in life. We talk about helping people and being compassionate to yourself. Like, what is the balance, I guess, would be my question. Or what is the balance as you guys see it? Because something I was thinking about leading up to this, because I didn't want to necessarily come into this with any sort of a script or anything. Big question was, if you're losing yourself while helping someone, are you really helping? If you need to be there for them in such a huge capacity that you can't exist, what's that good for either one of you? Oh, and then I started thinking about it a little more, and I find helping seems to break down to three different scenarios in my life. Like my horse, Johnny, who was sick last week, who needed a surgery. And that's really stressful, right? Like, it's an emergency. We had to act really quickly. He would have died if we didn't. So that's a situation where your feelings don't matter. You just need to deal with the situation. And then you can feel things after, right? And that can happen in any sort of emergency in your life. But that's like short-lived. Like, there's a beginning and an end to that. And then professionally, being a massage therapist in a helping role, there's boundaries there that are just implicit that we actually have to respect as like professional boundaries. I think if anything in my day job, you have to not have compassion fatigue, where you realize that maybe I see 10 people in a day, and every hour I spend with every person, that's their hour. So if the person I saw before was by needs, it doesn't matter to the next person. You still have to try to be there for them and not be burnt out. And that's knowable. There's parameters there too. But then in your personal life, no holds barred, right? There's nobody steering the ship for you. And that's trickier, I think. Because you've got to figure out, you have to come up with those boundaries as you go. It always changes, right? Based on what's going on and how you feel. And there's no fixed rules. So enlighten me.
Nedzin, you had something to say a minute ago.
I find what you're saying is very real and realistic to start with, because it's our everyday reality in what we do, whether in real life or in our professional life. As you've mentioned, there are some emergencies where we have to put everything aside and then take care of them. But I find in what you're saying about taking care of your clients, I find there has to be some kind of self-awareness within us to be able to know that if I still have it in me to give that person what they need in this moment or not, or it depends on our personal situation, or can I offer them the care they need today or not? I think for me, it starts with that. I don't know what you think, Daniela.
I think there was a lot of different points in what you brought up, Quinn, and they're all pretty valid. There's the idea that we wear different hats for different parts of our lives, that's for sure. And the boundaries that we set are going to change depending on what that is. There's also the fact that inherently, like you said, you're in a helping profession, so are we. So I think we have an inherent sort of, not ability, that's the wrong word, but affinity, let's say, towards giving. That's part of what we do. And as a result, especially in the type of work that we do, there is the expectation that in that moment, like you said, in your case, Quinn, in that hour, you are giving. And that's that person, that specific client that you're giving to in that hour. Framed within that time, it's a little bit easier. When we move to other parts of our lives, it's more difficult to have that delineation between, okay, how much is enough? Where does that line happen between self-preservation and giving?
I'd say, as like you said, maybe I'm guilty of being more prone to giving. So if that's the natural direction you take, you've got to check in with yourself and try to reorient yourself and say, okay, has this gotten out of control? Am I no longer being true to myself in this? Because you don't have those reference points that are provided in other aspects, like I said earlier, yeah.
And the type of work that we do as therapists, that's part of our training too, right? Like we have to learn to be able to set those limits. It's not always easy, as you probably witness yourself, Quinn. Like sometimes you have somebody who's in bad shape or who's in a lot of pain or who, and it's hard to say at the end of that, whatever 30-minute or 60-minute massage session, okay, good luck to you, see you. Even harder when there's the psychological pain that accompanies it too. And the work that you do as well, Quinn, you know that if you don't, then you're going to run into the next person's time. But more importantly, you're going to burn out at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. I think when it comes to pain, my compass is a little different than my background is. I have compassion for people's pain, but it doesn't come home with me at night, really, within reason. Massage therapist, I've got to qualify that. Like the stakes are fairly low for me. I'm not dealing with people in the acute stages of like amputation or anything like that. I think being a massage therapist, I got really good at maintaining boundaries with people, right? Because it's not my job to disagree with people or inform their beliefs in any way. But man, did I hear all kinds of stuff, right? And you've got to try to be neutral as far as like how you feel about what that person is saying and still provide them the same quality of care. It's my job to help them within my scope of practice, right?
Right.
Simple. But I was working 12-hour days, 6 days a week, which is insane, but that's what I was doing. And often at the end of the day, I would just be fried until I figured out how to just let it wash off and recognize what my role was to help that person. Does that make sense?
And that goes back to what we were saying a minute ago, that certain people have more of a propensity to take on those charges than others. There are some people who could just go through life and hear a lot and just compartmentalize or be in their own world enough that it wouldn't really cause an issue. But I think the more empathetic you are and the more attuned you are to other people's emotions, the more it is likely to get to you. And I'm sure lots of people had very similar experiences to what you're talking about, Quinn. And that's the point of what we're talking about today, is how do you embody self-care into that while at the same time not losing that empathetic and compassionate side of yourself.
Yeah. And I guess that's where tease something out of this. And as you're talking, how I got through it was recognizing that everybody has something, I'll say, kind in them, for lack of a better term, or it's usually coming from a place of, if they're being really negative, it's coming from a place of fear. But beneath that is probably a good person, and there's common ground there. So you try to have compassion for them, looking for the reasons to have compassion for them, and just let this sort of emotional temper tantrum like pass you by. But then also recognize some things that people say are just not acceptable. Like having that balance, one person at a time, if that makes sense. To not justify certain things that people do or make them immune to certain social norms, but to just maybe understand why they're in that state in that moment. Like, it's a bad day. I mean, we all have bad days.
Right. It is about having that compassion for them, but still understanding that there are certain things that are unacceptable. So, for example, I don't know, let's say you have somebody, not even in a work context, but let's say in a social context, that is completely spinning out of control and is starting to become belligerent and yelling and calling people names or that kind of thing. You could have compassion and say, yes, I understand this is something they feel very strongly about. And clearly they might have had some emotional injury at some point, but you're absolutely correct in saying at a certain point, you also have to stop the behavior and say, okay, look, this is unacceptable. You have to calm down or you have to leave, for example.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was touching on when I first started, was that, like, when it's work, those boundaries are set for you. So it's where the lines in the sand are. But then interpersonally outside of work, it's up to you to set those, right? And how much do you want to look past someone having a bad day and say, hey, today's just not their day. They don't actually necessarily mean this. Because I know often when I'm irritated, I say things I don't even mean. And I think about it after and I'm like, shut up, Win. But you're just having a bad day. But it's up to you to decide what is okay with you.
And I think we also have different social contracts in different situations and with different people.
Yeah.
Like if someone's your good friend or whatever, and they're having a bad day, but they're really behaving inappropriately, you might be a lot more at ease to say, hey, look, stop this. This is not okay. Than you would if you saw someone in the parking lot of a shopping center being belligerent to you or whatever. That might be a totally different approach because you don't know them. And even there, like, it could take two different routes. Like, you could say, okay, I don't know them, therefore I can set a very firm boundary and be quite strong with it. Or the other way around, you could say, I don't know this person, so, they might actually be dangerous. So it's probably not a good idea for me to set a strong boundary, and might actually be softer in that situation. There's no hard and fast rule. It really is situationally dependent and person dependent, I guess. Nazin, what do you think?
I agree with both what you're saying. And I also think we have tendencies sometimes that kind of plays in us. We have a tendency, sometimes it takes us to behave in a certain way more than another, but we all might have bad days where even those tendencies doesn't stand and we might act differently. I agree also with Quinn that work boundaries kind of help in a way, and people crossing those boundaries are clearer for us. But I find in taking care of us as therapists or givers also, it is important to acknowledge our boundaries with all our environments, because sometimes what's happening outside of work might take a toll on what's happening in our professional life and vice versa. So I think we need to be aware of what are in our boundaries and when they are crossed. Not just that, but I find important is which boundaries picks on us to the point where we cannot function or be clear about what we're doing. Because sometimes we have our boundaries crossed, whether in personal life, whether as you said, in the supermarket or whatever, but we're still maintaining ourselves and functioning well. I think it's important to have this difference.
Hey everyone, we hope you are enjoying this podcast. Want to find out more about this topic and much more? Check out our courses at Mentalist Academy. Find out more at www.mentalistacademy.com. And now, back to our podcast.
You also touched on something, Nedzin, that Quinn talked about initially. Quinn, when you were talking about your horse, and you said that's like an emergency situation, and you jump in and you become a bit like an emergency medical technician in those situations. I think emotionally that happens too. I think we all have the capacity to jump in an emergency situation and deal with the trauma at hand. But it's when that trauma is prolonged or when that need to be that way drags on that it becomes difficult then to say, okay, where's the boundary? So for example, if you have a friend who's in need or something, it's easy enough for someone who's compassionate and caring to say, I'm going to step in and help that person. But then at a certain point, you have to become self-preserving too, right? You have to be able to say, okay, now I have my own issues I have to deal with, or I have my own emotional crisis. So where do you draw that line? That's where it gets fuzzy. So Nedzin, you're correct in saying, like, from a work perspective, those boundaries are a lot clearer. Once you leave the work setting, it becomes a lot more fuzzy. And I think that's where people tend to get hooked up sometimes. Does that make sense, Glenn?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I think I might be about to say something crazy, but here we go anyway. So as you're talking about the crisis and the timeline on the crisis, that when somebody is compromised in some way and you may cut them extra slack, I'm thinking about, so I'm going to bring it to myself, being somebody with a disability, right? Most people are compassionate towards people who are in a challenging circumstance, which is great, right? That's what makes humanity work in a lot of ways. We take care of each other. And in my case, it's measurable, right? There's an eye chart that will tell you that my vision is worse than 20/200 and I'm legally blind, and that's not going to change. But is that an excuse for me to expect special treatment for my whole life? Or at a certain point, you need to just get over it. And obviously there's going to be situations where I'm going to struggle with things. I can't read certain things, and that's not going to change. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're enabling somebody to play the victim at a certain point, I think you're harming them, and it's up to them to look within themselves and say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a victim. Sometimes you need a little extra help. You get knocked down by whatever it is in life. Like I said, it's not always measurable. But it's up to that person to not want to be that for their whole life. And as their friend and someone who actually cares about them, are you helping them by letting them keep doing that?
I think a lot of it is a question of degrees. And keep in mind, and this is something that I try to keep in mind in the work that I do all the time, is that everybody has agency to a certain degree, right? So I have to believe that the people I work with are capable of fixing their own lives, and that I'm there to help guide them. Yes, I'm there to help them see things that they might not see otherwise. But my fundamental belief is that they have the capacity within themselves, one way or another, to find the resources within themselves. That being said, so there's a difference between helping and, in a way, victimizing all over again. There's a big difference between saying, okay, I'm going to try my best to help this person see what they're not seeing within themselves or to get over certain obstacles, and saying, you're incapable of doing it, I'm going to do it for you. So in your case, Quinn, when you're talking about your vision issues, they're real. It's not like you're going to suddenly be able to, no matter how much you want to believe in it, tomorrow morning suddenly just be able to see whatever you want to see. So I think it's up to every individual. It's up to you to be able to say, okay, there are certain things that I can't do and I do need help with. But then it's also up to the other person, whoever they might be, to say, yes, I will help you with this, but you know what? I can't help you with that, or that's too much. Like it's always a bit of a negotiation. And again, I go back to the idea that it's depends on the person and the relationship you have with that person, of knowing like who can offer more and who can't. And it's up to that person to tell you if they can or they can't.
Yeah, I think you are owning it. And that's why you can deal with it in that perspective and not expecting everybody to help you with whatever, with everything. But that I don't find everybody has this capacity, whether it's physical disability or mental or even emotional. It's not easy for people sometimes to say, this is what's happening with me. I can't deal with it, or I can deal with it. And to be able to be clear about it the way you are. This is what I think, you see. I find you're dealing with it in a mature matter. You know what's happening, what are your capacities, you know what you're expecting from others. But that's not easy for everybody, at least from my perspective, whether personally or professionally. I find it personally more difficult because some people struggle with their own emotions and feelings towards their environment or closed ones. But professionally also, you have to go with them where they are to help them reach places where they are not getting into that spot or where they feel victimized all the time. I don't know if I'm following up on what you're saying, or I just took a tangent here.
Where somebody has a certain recognizable deficiency and then use it as a tool to manipulate others around them. And I think it hurts everyone. It hurts them, people doing it, and it hurts the people in their life, because it's very hard to say no. When you see somebody struggling, you want to help them. I think most of us do, right? It's the question like I ask myself all the time is like, who am I helping now? Is this just instant gratification because I'm in this uncomfortable moment and I want to help this person, or maybe they want to help me? But day after day, if we keep repeating that, who's winning?
You're bringing up another subject, which I think is tied in and really interesting, which is this aspect of manipulation. Now, in my experience, even manipulation speaks to some sort of difficulty or pain. So
That's what I'm trying to say.
But it doesn't mean it's okay. If you're a therapist, for example, you have to be able to recognize that, yes, if someone is sitting across from you and you feel that there's some manipulation going on, you have to ask yourself the question, what's behind the manipulation? Where's the pain? What happened to this person that they are using this tactic to get what they need? And it's clearly not working because, part of why they come to therapy in the first place is because they've tried this with other people and they've either burnt them out or they've had falling out with people because of it and whatnot. But at the same time, and this goes back to now, I just talked professionally, but personally, in your personal life and your personal relationships with people, you do have to be aware of it and you do have to be able to put those boundaries. That's where the boundaries come in to say, okay, I'm willing to do this much. I'm willing to go up to this point, but I'm not going to go further, because then not only does it damage me, like you said, Quinn, but it also damages the other person. I'm not doing you any favors anymore. I'm actually just aiding and abetting your need for others and your refusal to take care of yourself. So it's two different things, and I think it's hard sometimes to navigate that. And that's true for therapists as well. We do that professionally. And as Zin said earlier, it's easier to set those boundaries professionally. Personally, and maybe you feel this way too, Quinn, because we're in the helping profession, there's almost like an expectation too that we're always open, always available. And it's pretty important to be able to set boundaries around that. Go ahead, Quinn, then you had something to add.
Yeah, I was just smirking because we're talking about medical emergencies, and I was going to say, are you familiar with what a man cold is? The debilitating state of a man cold, how crushing it can be. You could have had one a couple of weeks ago, and I woke up congested, miserable, and I thought, I can't do this. It's too much. It's too much. And then as the morning went on, I went to work, did my shift, it was fine. But again, we have those bad moments. And I guess you have to trust the other people in your life to recognize I don't know, when you're just being a goof and to let it go, you have to trust other people to let them help you. And you have to trust people that they're doing their best when you help them. Like in my life, it's not something that you just know. It's something that you learn as you go with the people that matter to you. Like the person you said in the parking lot that's behaving in a crazy way. To me, I'm not going to set a boundary with them unless they're actually endangering me. Right? So they don't matter to me. I'm not going to waste my energy on them. But the people that matter to me, they're the ones who you think about and you think, should I set this boundary or not? Or I don't know, you try to understand, right? And it's energy. And I guess you can only pick so many people that you give your energy to.
It's a difficult line to understand, like where altruism stops and where self-preservation kicks in. Like, I think there's been a lot of philosophers even that have argued over these conundrums over centuries, is to say, if you think about all those thought experiences, I don't know, there's a train track that splits into two. If the train goes one way, it runs over one person that you know, and if it goes the other way, it runs over 20 people that you don't know. What do you do? Those kind of, and it is difficult there's a reason why those philosophical questions are set up the way they are, because everybody is different in that way, in the way that they're going to necessarily answer that question or any question, but also because some people just naturally have a tendency to say, for whatever reason, and maybe it's not an altruistic reason, but more of a tendency to say, I will put myself and my needs aside to help someone else. And someone else may be much more self-preserving and say, no, I'm going to take care of myself and everybody else will take care of themselves. But again, it's understanding the fears and maybe the pain that they've had in their life that have made them that way. That's helpful. But also understanding that about ourselves. Like, what is it that causes us to give too much? I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, is why do I put my own health or well-being at risk for someone else constantly? What is it that's going on there? Yeah, it's tough to find that balance.
I feel like there's a healthy side of that too, though. I remember back in my days, I was a wrestler, this one rant friend of mine went on in the change room, and we're all just sitting there exhausted, leaning against the cool brick wall. And my buddy was on this meeting about how if you want to be your best, you have to want all of your training partners to be or their best. And I remember thinking, man, I want to win. Like, I'm not giving 24 hours a week of my life to this because I want to be second best. I want to be the best. That's why I'm working hard. And I realize, like, now, after the fact, that he's right. Like, you have to want them to be their best and not be afraid of that. And if you're better still at the end of it all, then you deserve to win. And you have to help them without fear of being less than them. Because, like, just for your own moment by moment, if you're afraid of other people being their best and you're withholding help or you're in some way sabotaging them, it's not good for them, but it's also not good for you. Makes sense.
That's like the other extreme of selflessness, right? That's what you're describing. Is the negative side of what you're describing is the complete opposite of selflessness, is to say, I'm going to win at all costs, to hell with what happens with everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that maybe it just means I was a weak person for a while. I don't know. But now I'm not scared to let other people be their best, even though I want to win, or if the world is finite, I want to get whatever I need, but I don't want to hold other people back to get it. And I find moment by moment, my life is better. And helping somebody doesn't have to hurt you. Helping someone can actually make that moment better and make your whole life better. It doesn't have to be extractive.
And somewhere in there's a gray zone, right? That says that maybe I don't need to completely self-sacrifice to be able to help someone else achieve what they want to achieve. But also, I don't need to be completely self-absorbed either and say it's all about me. There's a whole gray area in between there that is probably the best place to navigate. And that's what makes it tough, because the gray zone is by its very nature gray. Like, it's not black or white. So it's hard sometimes to figure out where you are in that gray zone.
But does that say something like about, you say, helping people without losing yourself? Why do you need to lose yourself to help? In certain situations, yeah, I get that happens, but at the same time, maybe it can just be a net positive for everyone. Maybe it makes everyone better.
It can. And those situations, I think, are a lot easier to navigate because it's a win-win. Like, there's a famous, in organizational psychology, there's a famous example that they give where they have two teams work on, it's called the Orange Project. And they tell the two teams, okay, there's a certain limited amount of oranges, and one team needs them to be able to recreate the plants and have a whole agricultural sector that they rely on for life. And the other one needs the oranges to make medication that will save the entire population. And this is like a negotiating, team building exercise, if you will. And they tell them, okay, so, work it out, like figure out like which team wins. The reality there is that if the teams actually end up talking to each other, they will realize that one needs the seeds and the other one needs the orange peel. But if they take an adversarial role to begin with, they'll never get to that conclusion. So the whole idea there is, how much can they get to the point where they finally talk to each other enough to understand that it is a win-win.
Right.
So in that scenario, what you're talking about is along those lines. That's a lot easier if you can get to that point to say, oh yeah, sure, I can help this person because A, it doesn't really harm me in any way. B, it actually makes me feel good to help them. That's a win-win. So those are the easy ones to navigate. It's the ones where it really does require much more of you to give, or that it makes you really feel terrible not to give. Those are the ones that are tougher. Nadine, we haven't heard from you in a while. What do you think?
I agree with everything that's been said. If I have to add something, it would be on the tendencies and where do they come from? Where does our tendencies come from, and how do they get played in any relationship we have with clients, with people? Why with this person, even if it's personal, it's easier for me to set my boundaries and say no and know where to stop, while with the other one, it's very difficult. I think those, as you said, are very gray zones, sometimes gray whitish, sometimes gray blackish, and to navigate in between, it is very hard. Depending on who we are, our relationship with those people, expectations, or what do they, judgment, all of that, the psychological issues that are behind it, how we grew up, or upbringing, all of that.
Yeah, which is why self-awareness comes into this. So, because it's only through self-awareness that we recognize, oh, like my heartstrings are being pulled in this situation because of ABC, whatever happened to me in my past. Or the alternative, like I'm wanting to turn my back on this person because these are my experiences with this type of person in the past. And therefore, like my natural reaction is just to say, hell no, I'm not going to help you, that kind of thing. So I think self-awareness is a big tool to help us understand like why we might be pulled in one direction or the other, which then allows us to set the healthy boundaries.
I suppose that's what it is, right? Earlier I said work sets parameters in my life, and then it's your past experiences. Those will be the parameters that you follow, but you can do it unconsciously, right? Unless you reflect on why you react certain ways. It's not written down in a contract anywhere that you have a college or an employer. So yeah, it's up to you to recognize what your rule book is that may or may not be helpful.
And you're right, Quinn, there's no right and wrong either. You could be reacting from something that happened to you in the past, yes. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't react that way. What that means is that you need to be aware of it. But it can also be self-protective that you're reacting that way. It may be exactly what you need in that moment.
Yeah, totally.
I would add to that, even if we know that we are reacting and we don't totally approve of our reaction, sometimes it's just what we can do at this point, and that's totally okay as well, because we're not at the point, let's say, to say my partner, no, I'm not doing this with you, or we choose our battles as well. So maybe I know, maybe I'm aware, yet I'm not comfortable with the decision I'm going to make, and I still have to make it.
So there's a lot of different pieces to this. There is self-compassion that you just brought up, Nedzin, which I think is true. Like, no matter what, like, this is all I can do. This is all I can contribute right now, and that's okay. And yeah, all of that comes into play, and it's not a hard and fast rule. Like, you might rate one way one day, be in the exact same situation the next day, and react completely differently.
Yeah.
You might be functioning on 2 hours sleep.
Or less.
Oh yeah, no, I think these are all very important topics, and I think that a lot of people will really appreciate you being so open, Quinn, and coming to us with these thoughts and these ideas, because I think that it's something that everybody struggles with. I know I do.
Yeah, for sure. Like, having a focal point, I find, is always helpful.
So what do you think, Quinn? Have we done a good, let's call it, preliminary pass through this subject today? Is this...
I think so.
I mean, we could probably, Nedzin and I could spend days. I see both of us are going off. I can see it in our eyes. Like, I know I have 17 different tangents we could go on, and we're
Exactly. What do we say? What do we not say?
Yeah, I guess myself, my takeaway, I really like what Nadine said, was sometimes you just have to do something and try to learn from it. You know, do something and then work with it one way or the other.
and understand that you're doing the best that you can with what you have at a given moment. We're human. That's the bottom line.
Yep.
All right. So I want to thank you, Quinn, for agreeing to do this and being part of this mental experiment of ours. Mental in so many different ways, but yes.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It was fun.
See you next time. Find out more at www.mentalizeacademy.com.